Hey y'all, I'm Marty. This is Marty's Musings. Let's get rolling. April 28th was International Tabletop Day. Tabletop Day was an event created by Geek and Sundry in 2013 for the purpose of creating events all over the world so that gamers could get together, play games, and teach others about games. And like in other years, this year was a big success. I reached out to Ivan Van Norman, who's the Tabletop Day coordinator at Geek and Sundry, to ask him to see if he had any stats that he could give me. He said that there were over 1,000 events registered on their site for that Saturday and that they covered every country around the world except the continent of Antarctica. Come on, Antarctica. Plus, he said that the Tabletop Day hashtag was trending top 10 around the world that day. I too went to an event that day. My co-host Tony and I attended a game event from our local game club, Queen City Game Club, at a local restaurant called the Valdorn. We had events set up throughout the day. We had prize giveaways. We played a lot of games. And then afterwards, I went and checked out my local game store, Carolina Tabletop Games, to see what was going on there. The place was absolutely packed with people coming in, playing all types of games and miniatures and role-playing games, and not a table was open. So locally, it was just a huge success. And I always think it's funny, every year I see these types of responses from people. I don't need Tabletop Day. I can play tabletop games any day. Well, that's true, and I guess this event really isn't for you. It's more for the people who want to have one time they can get together and play games. Maybe their calendar is packed and it's hard for them to find time to get together with others and play games. So they can notch out this one time on their calendar once per year, get together with others and play. But it's also a good time to teach others about games. Maybe a lot of people don't know about this hobby, and what we've done is create events that is open to the community and have them come in and say, hey, this is what hobby gaming is all about. So I don't understand why I see negativity about it every year. I mean, do they have the same sort of response for other annual events? I can eat ice cream any day I want. I don't need a National Ice Cream Day. I really wish I hadn't picked that as an example because I want ice cream now. Next, I want to talk about the rise in popularity of role-playing games. I saw this was kind of obvious when the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons came out. That edition came out and it just took off. Everybody was playing it. Locally here, we had a lot of people in stores that were picking up D&D 5 and teaching it and having events. And in fact, for the longest time, Pathfinder was the biggest selling role-playing game, but ever since D&D 5 came out, it seemed to take over. Locally, we replaced the Pathfinder events with D&D events, and it just seems to have gained steam over the years. In fact, the craze really caught my attention last year when Wizards of the Coast released Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and all of a sudden it was breaking all sorts of records. It was the #1 nonfiction book in the Wall Street Journal. It was the #1 nonfiction hardcover book in Publishers Weekly. It got up to #12 on USA Today's best-selling books, and that's all genres. And it got up to the #12 best-selling non-fiction book on Amazon. And what's even more amazing, within 3 weeks of its release, November 21st of last year, it was the fastest-selling D&D book in its 43-year history. In fact, even today, 10 of the top 15 books sold on Amazon in their fantasy category are D&D books from Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast has said they have had unprecedented sales since 2014 when the 5th edition came out, and 2017 was its biggest selling year ever. In fact, 8.6 million Americans played D&D last year. And that got me thinking, why has this game gotten so popular all of a sudden? One reason for its increase in popularity is just because it's just gotten more mainstream. Many big-time stars and actors have now come out and said, you know, I play Dungeons & Dragons. People such as Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Vin Diesel, Joe Manganiello, Stephen Colbert, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Judi Dench? Yeah, there's even rumors that Judi Dench is the DM for her grandchildren. Crazy! Greg Zito, who's the senior communications manager for D&D, said they saw an uptick in sales when Stranger Things came out in 2016. Now, if you haven't seen it, Stranger Things is a show that was released on Netflix in 2016, centered around a group of friends in the 80s, and the show actually starts out with these friends playing Dungeons & Dragons down in their basement, and the story kind of takes off from there. Now, I won't give any of the story away, but the Dungeons & Dragons game is a springboard into the rest of the show, and it's from that a lot of people were exposed to Dungeons & Dragons or remember playing it as kids and want to go check it out again, and we had this brand new popular version that came out, and with that, the sales just continued to grow. Streaming has also contributed to a big part in D&D's growth. 9 million people have watched others play Dungeons & Dragons on streaming channels such as Twitch and YouTube, and from that, they've gotten interested in what they've seen others play and wanted to go check it out. In fact, Greg Zito said, in 2017 alone, we had more than 7,500 unique broadcasters streaming live D&D for more than 475 million minutes watched over the course of the entire year. Also, Nathan Stewart, Senior Director of Dungeons & Dragons, said, over half of the new people who started playing 5th edition got into D&D through watching people play online. Stewart says the Dungeons & Dragons team is now aggressively investing in the scene as well, filling its official Twitch channel with more than 50 weekly hours of live play programming either produced or sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. A year ago, we probably had 2 shows we'd put on Twitch. Now it's more like 20. One of the more popular shows is Critical Role, which is on Geek and Sundry. This is a show that is GM'd by Matt Mercer, who is a voice actor and actor himself. On there, he's brought a lot of other actors onto the show. Many you might recognize, such as Vin Diesel or Joe Manganiello. And those shows have been extremely popular, with the very first episode of Critical Role having more than 5 million views since it was first aired. And with the rise in popularity of D&D, other companies are starting to coming out with new versions of their role-playing games. For example, the very popular Pathfinder has announced they're coming out with a 2nd edition. There's going to be a 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, and Cubicle 7 has announced they're releasing a 4th edition of the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game, and they tweeted out that within 3 hours after the pre-orders went up for sale, they're having to ramp up production. Other companies are starting to come out with brand new role-playing games. Renegade Games is coming out with Overlight that is currently now on Kickstarter. Fantasy Flight Games has announced they're coming out with Legends of the Five Ring RPG that's based on their Genesis system. And Ulysses is coming out with Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory. But again, I ask, what is the draw? And I think it really comes down to the fact that people love a good story. People love to watch a good story unfold. People like to participate and be a part of that story, and that's what role-playing games provide. And with apologies to our good friend Ignacy Chevicek from Portal Games, while some board games can tell stories, not all of them do. There's not a lot of Euros out there that after you play the game, or as you're playing the game, this rich world and story unravels in front of you and you're a part of it. But that's exactly what role-playing games do. You become an actor in a play and in a story that's carried out over multiple hours and then multiple sessions that can take up to a year to finish, which is exactly what Critical Role does. They have a campaign that may last up to a year, and people join in each and every time they have a brand new episode because they want to see where the story goes. If you're interested in playing role-playing games, one of the best places to go is your local game store. Many of them have regular scheduled events or regular game groups. I'm sure they'd be happy to teach you how to play. If you go to game conventions, many of them run RPG sessions where you can try out different systems, learn the rules, and just kind of get the hang of it. Another great resource is Free RPG Day. This is an event where local game stores provide free materials to different role-playing systems, and these materials contain introductory rules, character sheets, an intro scenario, just to introduce you to the system or to RPGs in general. This year's going to be on June 16th, and I have a link down below that you can go check out which of your local game stores will be sponsoring this event. And as a fan of pop culture such as movies and TV shows and comics, it's hard to ignore the juggernaut that was just released in theaters, Avengers: Infinity War. This movie within the first week is breaking all sorts of records, including breaking the Black Panther's pre-sale ticket record, sets single Saturday gross record, sets single Sunday gross record, sets domestic opening weekend record of $257.6 million, and setting the worldwide opening weekend record by over $100 million, which was previously held by Fast and the Furious, and it's also the fastest to break $300 million in the US. I actually feared this movie wasn't going to do that well. I'm kind of surprised because isn't it like after a certain amount of time we're going to start having superhero fatigue or Marvel fatigue? We've had 19 Marvel movies in the past 10 years, but they don't seem to be losing any steam. They still seem to be just as well received by critics and audiences. They still do very well in the theater. So how long can this last? And with all these popular movies coming out, you would think the sales of comics would be up, but they're not. I surely would have thought that all these people that would want to check out some of the comics that some of these characters are based on, but actually over the past year, sales have dropped in the comic industry. In fact, the main distributor of comics, Diamond, said that there was an over 10% drop in the comic market in 2017. And April of 2018 is actually the first time there was an increase in comic sales since May of 2017. Marvel was especially hit hard, which is so odd because it's the Marvel movies that are doing so well. Now, typically they have year-over-year growth, but they used to have a 10% year-over-year growth. In 2017, it was down to 5%. And a lot of people are asking why. Well, from what I could tell, there are a lot of different factors. There were a lot of traditional characters in the comics that the writers changed and modified a little bit that people weren't too crazy about. Marvel introduced some new characters that didn't really go over very well, and sales didn't increase there. So now Marvel is kind of struggling. They're backpedaling on some of their stories and resetting some of the characters and everything to try to get the sales up. And since sales were up this month, maybe we're going to finally see a turnaround. Will it explode like we've seen in the theaters? Well, I guess time will tell. But I do highly recommend, if you like any of the movies that you've seen, go to your local comic book store and you might find some monthly periodicals that you might want to pick up and continue to read. And now for this episode's interesting fact. May 29th is Put a Pillow in Your Fridge Day. I could put a pillow in my fridge any day. Why do I need a special day to put a pillow in my fridge? I told you I was craving some ice cream. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the channel and please click the notification bell. If you'd like to check out our podcast, you can do so at rolldicetakenames.com, or you can check out the uploaded episodes here to this channel. I've been Marty Connell, and that's my take.